Hello, sir.
How are you?
I'm very well. So we can, there's nobody on here yet. Oh, Brian's here. Hi, Brian. We'll just say hi and before you introduce yourself, let a few more people get on here. But just like you showed me before, Nathan, before you sit too comfortably, would you show us where you are? I have the sun in my face, so I apologize for kind of doing this.
Oh, that's okay. All right. So that is Seneca
And just,
Lake.
Nathan, so you know the way this works, people pop in and pop off. And so I'll ask you to do this a couple of times throughout the chat. That's really beautiful. Ugh.
That's all right.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're not going to a road. It's not too noisy.
Okay, I'm going to have lawnmowers and basketball games around me, I'm afraid, so you can't really get away from it. But I have to say that's one of the things I like about during this time. It's a people just realize I came to Connecticut with like a suitcase for a week, maybe 2-3 weeks, so I'm like wearing the same clothes all the time, and it's a weird time. So back to you. Would you introduce yourself and tell me? I can't believe I haven't ever met you. I feel like we know all the same people. Would you tell me your story, how you got into wine and how you got where you are?
Yeah, of course. So I started in the industry at 18, pouring wine, and just a weekend gig. And I did that through college, and then post college, I just wanted to learn more. You know, at that point, I had read plenty of books and was just eager to get my hands dirty. So I packed up my bags. I did an internship out in California, and just had a blast doing that. So I quickly learned that if I went from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, I could do 2 to 3 harvests a year instead of the traditional one. So that for about 5 years, and the plan was always to come back to the Finger Lakes. So in 2011, I ended up taking a gig at Ravine.
Okay.
And
what was the last part? I missed that. I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a data lag. After Ravine?
So yeah, I took a job at Ravines, and I ended up staying. And my boss at the time at Ravines, Morton, was let me, make my own little projects in the corner that just grew every year until I couldn't balance the two.
Uh-huh. And did you say you're from that area to begin with?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And where you said you were pouring wine, was that in the city or up around with some of the really good schools up there? I keep losing your audio. I don't know if it's me or if it's you. What did you say? Can you repeat that for me?
Yeah, I started wine here in the.
I know it. I think I'm going to have a better connection now. So Finger Lakes, and then you were pouring wine in the city. I apologize for the third time now.
Nope, pouring wine here in the Finger Lakes.
Got it. Okay, excellent. So can you, I'm going to ask you to do this now and then again a little bit later. We're going to hopefully talk until 4:30. And by the time 4:15 rolls around, we'll have a completely different audience watching. And I am so enamored of the Finger Lakes. I'd like to have you explain that for people who don't know the area, who aren't in wine. So there are some consumer level wine interest people from Europe on here that will be interested to know about just the generality of Finger Lakes.
Where do I start?
It's upstate. That's what I know. Give us.
Yeah, a little further upstate than the Hudson. It's about 5 hours in a car from New York. Closer to Canada than New York City, that's for sure. Yeah, and grape growing in the Finger Lakes started in the mid 1800s. I think the first grapes were planted in the 1820s over on Cuca Lake. Wine production didn't really set in until about the 1850s. And back then we were doing sparkling wines with old native and hybrid varieties that are very well acclimated to the region. And that continued on for quite a while. We were doing it very successfully on the large scale. We were getting highly trained winemakers from Europe. And then Prohibition happened, which was devastating. We never really rebounded for quite some time. And when we started to, consumer tastes had shifted. So New York State had just kind of fallen behind in the whole winemaking scene. And it started to pick back up. And we had Dr. Frank came here, a very well-known producer from the region. And he had brought with him some techniques from Eastern Europe that allowed us to farm the more winter or not as winter hardy varieties. And that was kind of the beginning of it. And that kind of exploded, and we realized that, you know, farmed correctly with a good proximity to the lakes, we could grow these different varieties.
So as far north as you are, it's not like England that because of climate change, they're starting to be able to make wine. You guys have been able to make wine because of the lakes. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, for example, we have Seneca Lake behind me, which is the largest Finger Lake at about 650 feet deep and I believe about 37 miles long.
Mm-hmm.
And being a massive body of water, it never freezes. It's only frozen maybe, I think, twice since they started recording history. So because of the lake not freezing and having these gentle slopes down to the bodies of water, we get these microclimates that allows that keeps the air temperature warmer and moving. That's why if you go, you know, just up the hill here, you wouldn't be able to grow these varieties.
And when you say warmer, it's really because it's not warmer, it's just not freezing air that comes off the lake and keeps the slopes just a little bit above freezing, right?
It's warmer as well. Like, for example, I'm down here on, you know, Route 14, about half a mile to the lake, and I live about 3 miles in the other direction.
Okay.
And when I leave there, say on a cold winter morning, it's about 5 degrees colder over there.
Oh, wow. So you really, okay. Wow. That always just fascinates me when you come from, I'm in Hartford, Connecticut right now, and just that hour difference makes, it can be 10 degrees sometimes. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. That works. So can you tell us about your projects? There's a lot. So please, everybody that I know is like, oh my gosh, you're talking to Nathan. Ask all the questions. So please talk as much as you can or want to about all your projects.
Okay. So I work on 3 different projects. The first one I started was the Kendall Wines, or, well, used to be Kendall. It's Nathan K now. That was a little project I started in 2011 with a focus on Riesling, Pinot Noir, and then I ended up adding Chardonnay. And then in 2000,
is that the one with geometric labels that are kind of like a Mondrian?
Yep.
Who did those labels? They're just so striking and really pretty.
Well, what happened was I wanted a very clean label, and then I was working with a local graphic designer, and everything she brought back was boring. So I went in the opposite direction, and I was always a big fan of Frank Lloyd. Was the inspiration for those labels.
That's Brian on here and just said that was he preempted you. And then Stephanie Schwartz says hi, and John Bojanowski I chatted with this morning from the Languedoc is also on here. So I interrupted you. Keep talking about your wine project.
Oh yeah. So that project ended up growing, and I ended up leaving my job in 2015, and then years back in 2002, my parents started a wine project with a friend of theirs. They had differing opinions on how to do it, so they ultimately split up. Mm-hmm. And then in 2015, they had the opportunity to take back the brand. So I said, let's go for it. So they took it back. I started making the wine, and we just completely rebranded and went in a different direction than what it was originally.
And what's that project called?
That's called Hickory Hollow.
Okay. And all basically from the same lots or land-wise? Where are the vineyards?
Some of the vineyards there's overlap, others there aren't. It's ultimately differences in the winemaking.
Okay.
Mhm.
Third project?
Third project would be Chepika.
Mhm.
And, that was started in 2016 with a friend of mine, Pascaline Lepeltier, Master Sommelier.
Yep.
And we were just discussing local wines, and she wanted just a hyper local, organic, no sulfur wine for her restaurant, and it didn't exist. So I proposed that, it could be done, but it'd have to be made first. So we did some trial batches with 2014 Catawba juice that we got from another winery.
Uh-huh.
And then we found results. So, doing 16.
I missed that last part. I may have to move. Sorry. But that's made with hybrid grapes, right?
Yep.
Can you talk about what hybrid grapes do? I'm gonna walk and talk at the same time. What's the story with hybrid grapes?
So hybrids are grapes that are bred to ultimately perform with superior qualities, like such as cold hardiness or more disease resistance.
Uh-huh.
And we didn't really want to reinvent the wheel, so we just decided to work with the old hybrids that made famous, 150.
Are you there?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So it's not something you're breeding. You're picking grapes for the qualities that you want.
Yep.
I see. And is that fairly common up there, the hybrid grapes?
Yes, they're very common. I mean, they've been here a lot longer than the vinifera varieties.
So can you kind of run us through the grapes that you choose to use and what you get from each of those?
Yeah, so we chose to work with Delaware and Catawba
Okay.
because they were making world-class sparkling wines, and if it wasn't broken, why fix it?
Sure.
So that was kind of the idea behind that.
And what is the benefit and why did you choose those grapes, and then what do they taste like in the wine?
So we chose them because of the historical significance of the two.
Okay.
And then obviously we did our trials to make sure that it was going to be something people would want to drink.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both very interesting. Delaware, to me, is a very, very noble variety. It has more similarity with the vinifera. It's a very small cluster, tight clusters, small berries. The crop level is naturally very low. The wine quality very high. Whereas most other of these old hybrids, they tend to be, rather large clusters. If you don't, maintain the crop level, be 8, 10, 12 tons an acre. And the berry, just massive.
Wow, right. And so then what is the wine that you're making? It's the Pet Nat?
Yep. We did 2 pet nats this last year and 1 rosé.
Oh, okay. So it's a still wine too.
Yep. Well, that was.
Go ahead.
In 2018, it was a very challenging year.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't entirely too confident with the sparkling wine, so we opted to really cut production and to do. In full disclosure, I wanted to make a red wine, but Catawba being such massive berries,
Yeah.
white cluster, and then you throw in the mix doing 100% whole cluster fermentation, it ended up being, like a slightly tannic, herbaceous rosé.
Wow. And
people people really liked it, so we decided to, bring it back again in 2019.
And how are you selling that? Is it retail, or before this was it on premise, or is it just through your website?
Nope, it's all over. We do, a good chunk of it goes down to New York City through Avant-Garde Wine and Spirits. A little bit goes to export, and we do direct-to-consumer shipping, and then it's also available here at the tasting room. We try to split it up to make sure everybody can get some.
And has that been a bit of a hedge since since the shutdown?
What do you mean?
Like a lot of restaurants, because I do the restaurant, so a lot of wineries that I work with are like 60 or even 80% on premise. And so when this happened, they're having to switch and try to sell more through their website or try to push their retail. And the people who were, 50-50 or direct and then on and off were probably the best because they had more channels. How have you fared when the shutdown?
I mean, I think the wine business is just like every other business, and that you immediately have to rethink your game plan and just adjust. So, I mean, that's we switched up to work with a different company on shipping for direct to consumer to allow access to more states. We're curbside delivery.
Okay.
I mean, you got to get creative because again, restaurants have always been very good to me.
Yeah, for sure. I first tasted your Nathan K project at Union Square Grill. So you're not just in the city though, right? You're for all three projects. You're kind of spread out.
Hickory is predominantly direct to consumer and on premise.
Okay.
Because Hickory Hollow brand is it's the physical location where I'm sitting, the tasting room, where people come to buy it and taste it in person.
Okay.
And
so
Nathan K has always been when I started I didn't have a tasting room. So I'm selling it out of the trunk of my car, having in public places so it wasn't creepy. And then naturally wholesale and export.
So your experience way back when you started has benefited you because you haven't been just a farmer and a winemaker. You've been hustling wine in the past, so it wasn't a completely new game for you.
Right.
Yeah. So for people that don't know, can you explain, like for the Nathan K Riesling, how is a Riesling from Finger Lakes different from a Riesling, say, from Oregon or from Alsace or Germany? Like, what's unique about Riesling, flavor-wise and maybe structure or whatever you think?
Well, we tend to we're a very cool climate, and I'd say we're inconsistent with the weather. Like every year is radically different with different changes, but we do know that predominantly most of the years are going to be cooler. So you're wines with lower alcohol, slightly higher acid, which can often they're lighter bodied, leaner. But I try to embrace that and work with the lower alcohol, work with the higher acid, and then do some barrel fermentations, do long lees aging to kind of take that be rather proud of it.
So then how does that, since you don't own vines, how does that work with you working with farmers? And then what does a farmer do differently in the vineyard to knowing that that's the kind of wine you're going to end up with?
I mean, it's, I've changed farmers over the years. Early on I had access to particular sites, but when I left my job, I lost access.
Sure.
And then there's a learning curve. You find the farmers that you want to work with that are willing to work with you, ultimately, and reward them in the process. Or make them want to work with you.
Yeah.
I've tried that approach with some growers, and I was told to leave and never come back. So some learn to work with you.
Live and learn, right?
Yeah. And then again with that, it's the way the sites perform, they're all very different. whether it's the soils or the aspect or what side of the lake. So getting to know the sites is also very important. For example, I had one site that I had worked with for years that I absolutely hated, and I didn't think I could make a great wine out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So here, I'd split the lot into as many batches as possible and tweak different variables on all of them. And after about 4 years, it's like, wow, this is probably my favorite site now, because I figured you couldn't just beat it into submission. You had to figure out what that vineyard wanted. What's the best expression of it?
Wow.
You know?
Are there other people up there doing this kind of thing, kind of the garagiste model, where you're having relationships with vineyards, and is that model becoming long-term, like more like Burgundy, where there are people who own land and other people who long-term manage the vines?
I mean, I think ultimately a lot of us want to own land, but it's just the cost to get in is a lot if you're a young person, doing a cellar hand job for somebody. It's tough to get there. We ultimately want to be there, but I'd say there's a fair amount of wineries, both very small and even some that are very large, that source fruit from other people.
No. And then I was also struck very much that there's a big enotourism component up there, and it doesn't sound like it's going to affect you so much, but like all of Pennsylvania comes up there for like wine country trips in the summer and tasting, and it's not just New York that you guys provide wine for.
No, I feel like the Finger Lakes wine region is like Las Vegas for the people of Pennsylvania. They love it. That's great. A lot of these wineries are paying their bills.
Yeah.
So it's scary, but I mean, we'll adjust, we'll adapt, we'll be back to normal at some point, or normal.
Yeah, normal, exactly. Watching what's happening in Europe to kind of like see, like I'm very curious about how people are making restaurants work, and here in Connecticut they just opened restaurants so you can eat outside tonight. I can go sit outside and eat in a restaurant, which New York is going to be a long time before that happens. It's very weird. Are you watching what other people do? Is there a consortium of people that you talk to about moving forward? How are people planning?
I mean, I'm very cautious about things, just because it's like I have very close members in the family who are older and aren't in the best, general health. So we're taking every single safety precaution to make people feel comfortable.
Yeah. Wow.
If you come in and buy some wine, then it's just going to be the group that was in that particular car. That's the only people allowed in at a time. We're going to clean up when you're done before we let the next people in. I just want to provide an atmosphere where people feel safe.
That's very wise. It's a lot of work though, but I guess it's what it is for now. So are you able to sell all three brands out of the location where you are, out of that tasting room?
Yep.
That's awesome. And then I assume how do you have the three different brands, like a website for buying online? Are they all kind of different websites, or is it through your website?
They're all different websites with a link to the same secure shopping cart.
I see. Okay, so it's kind of streamlined. And what's the easiest way for people to get to your wines? I imagine in your bio here at Kendall Wine?
Yep, right in the bio. Click on the link. It'll take you to the website, and then on every page of the website is a link to the card.
Can you turn the camera around and just show all the newcomers to where we are again and explain just a little bit?
Okay. So we are here overlooking Seneca Lake.
There's something about a vineyard. I don't know. It's just so pretty.
Well, this is quite a big one. This is owned by two different farmers. It even goes up the hill there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're on the west side of Seneca?
Yeah, the west side, about halfway up.
Is that where most vineyards are? I mean, there's some on the east side, and then there's a couple other lakes, right? But mostly where you are?
I mean, you need the bigger bodies of water. So it'd be the Chepika Lake, Seneca Lake, Cayuga Lake. There's a couple small operations, smaller lakes, but those are a little trickier. But
Cool.
the lake is the most widely planted.
We're getting close to the half-hour mark where I try to keep it under a half an hour. So just to wrap up, would you mind kind of go through a few of your wines to tell people what to look for, and then we'll direct them to your website if they want to buy online.
I'm under 10%. So for the whites, the focus, aromatic, Rieslings, Gewürztraminers, Chardonnay. As I mentioned, higher acid, texture, things aged on the lees, moderate alcohol. So, I mean, you can have a second glass, not feel bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
For the red wines, I like whole cluster. So the wines are very light, very fruit forward, crunchy, just super refreshing. I drink them with a slight chill.
Oh, cool. Okay. And what grapes are those in your reds again?
Cabernet Franc Noir.
Okay. And then the newest one you just posted about the pet net, it just got released?
Tomorrow at 10 a.m.
And it's going to sell out pretty quickly, right?
Typically does, yeah.
That's awesome. And explain what that one is.
So that is low alcohol, about 9%. Higher pressure than most pet nats. It's more in line with champagne pressure than a pet nat pressure, and that high acid. The Cava is like super floral. Just yeah.
Awesome. And that's the project with Pascaline.
Yep.
That's awesome. Hey, Jeffrey just got on. Hi, Jeffrey. And yeah, he says you're almost sold out in New York.
Doing a great job.
Yeah, he's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will let you go, sir. It's a real pleasure to chat. I hope to see you sooner. I got to get back up there, and next time you come to the city, I hope to run into you.
Good. I'll be here.
All right. Take care, man. Thank you for taking the time to talk about your wines with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Be strong. Have a good weekend, man.
You too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.